You know, sometimes we can get bogged down in technical things, but the primary focus here is how does this affect me, my family, my church, my community, so that I can be part of reaching the world with the gospel. A couple of things. You've already been introduced to Crossworld. John Spadafora is living in this area, Philadelphia area, and represents Crossworld. I'm a Crossworld member, but I'm also connected to a business as mission consulting group called IBEC Ventures. Their banner is back there, and also my business card is there. So I'm basically working with two organizations. And we're going to talk about IBEC Ventures a little bit, because an IBEC Ventures is a coaching and consulting group for BAM. We are here to mobilize God's people with expertise to connect with these businesses. And Craig was talking about that. Every skill, every profession has value to God's building his kingdom worldwide. So we're going to talk about that. That's IBEC Ventures. All right, IBEC is IBEC. That's an acronym coming from International Business and Education Consultants. Craig represents, in fact, he started it and is also still the CEO of IBEX Associates. That's IBEX. That is not an acronym. That is the name of his company. And he can tell us about Himalayan mountain goats if he wants to. But that's where that comes from. And that is an investment firm. He will talk about that during this hour. Two organizations we partner. We do some things together. We have greatly benefited from his organization, and we hope to benefit even more both ways. So just to have that straight. IBEX and IBEC Ventures. We're both about supporting and encouraging and developing and growing BAM in the world. All right? So feel free to query along that line as we move forward. There's other organizations in this space, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But I think those are the two that we represent most strongly. We're going to talk about Agora Enterprises, which is a way for younger people to get involved, actually, and go. So we'll talk about that later as well. I'm going to show this little clip. It's 4 minutes. Look for everything you have heard these last 2 hours. Look for it in there, in this thing. Because it introduces, what I'm going to ask after we've seen it is, where did you see ways where the people of God connected with this? Regular people with regular skills, regular jobs. And we'll just process that a bit, and then Craig and I will work through how that relates to you. All right, so there you have a little picture of how Gil, from his office in Dallas, tried to apply what he learned at a seminar just like this. He said he had a leather import business, and he said, hey, we can go over there and make a difference by starting a factory. Now, we're not all going to start factories. There's lots of different ways to get involved. So here we go. I'm going to show a couple of slides here, and then I'll ask Craig to come, and we'll just do this together. We use the term consultant. A consultant is a professional who provides expert professional advice, a person who can listen, ask questions, and assess well. Now, we live in an age of consultancies, but all of us have learned things in life that we can pass on to the next generation. And they could be simple things about marriage. It can be things about God's faithfulness. It can be things about anything, and certainly in business. And so we look at a consultant as somebody who's spiritually qualified, maybe I should stand over here, somebody who's relationally capable, and somebody who is experientially seasoned, okay? So that somebody who's been an engineer for 6 years is experientially seasoned. I'll give you an example. We had a factory in northern China, and the guy had purchased machines that were imported, and he was having trouble with his machines, and there was nobody around that seemed to be able to fix this problem. And it wasn't a very complex problem, but it shut him down. So he called me and said, can somebody help me? I just need to talk to somebody on the phone. Well, I just met a mechanical engineer in Kansas City. He said, I'm not leaving Kansas City. We're living here. I got 2 kids. Can I do anything? So I called him up, and I said, can you talk to Ryan in China? I don't know what his problem is, but you might be able to help him. But 3 weeks later, Ryan called me and said, man, thanks for linking me up with Eric. We had it fixed in about 2 phone calls. And it wasn't that complicated, but I didn't have a clue what to do. Do you think that mechanical engineer felt that he was part of the kingdom of God, building the kingdom of God? He does now, because Sandy, Ryan's wife, with the gift of evangelism, has story after story after story of people coming to Christ in that community because of that business. And so there's just a little glimpse of how people with expertise can do that. Coaching is specific. Well, this is how we define it, and everybody does it a little bit differently. But coaching is specific and facilitative. Mentoring is deeper and holistic. Subject matter experts is more specialized. But everybody needs to know who they are and what they can or can't do. Those are the things that Craig was talking about earlier. So I would like to just skip over here to, these are some, not all, the issues at stake as we go abroad to work in businesses, and I absolutely agree with Craig. For every one entrepreneur that can kick something off, there's 10 of us behind the scenes keeping track of the money, keeping track of the people, understanding the laws, what goes on and on. So these are the kinds of things that these businesses are dependent upon knowledge, usually outside of themselves. And as you look at that list and stimulate other areas in this list, that expertise exists in the kingdom of God. It exists in this church. It exists in your church if you're from somewhere else. And those are the people that, with those skills, that with a small visit or even no visit, like the engineering story I told, can make a difference in helping these businesses. And that's one way to get involved. Let me stop there. Any questions about the value or the purpose or how I can get involved with some expertise I have? Just name any expertise you have, and Craig and I will respond to it. Yes? Craig, do you want to come now too? I think you're still wired, right? The question is, do we have a list of people that have critical needs? So I think what you're asking is, in these kinds of domains, do you have something specific in, say...
I'd say people visit Lake Catawba, the guy who wants to stay in Kansas, he brings an expertise to the table. Have you developed a list of people like that who could come alongside?
We do, and I can, do you want, I usually don't bring a list to the table, although in our newsletter that comes out this month, we have a list of 5 where people don't need to leave this country. Gwen, can you remember some of them? Think about it for a sec. That they can get involved in helping here. Now, with regard to overseas, the businesses that we're involved with, and Craig's involved with many more of them, we could, off the top of our head, give you some ideas as to kinds of things. You want to share that, Craig?
Yeah, our approach in IBEX with our portfolio of companies, we keep on top of the needs that they've got or that they're anticipating. Sometimes they're not aware of what they need. We become more aware of it. And so we keep that list updated, and you can find out from one of our team members what companies need what help. In general, we find that at least some on-the-ground exposure to that business is of critical importance, so that it's hard to understand what a business is going through from a remote location. But once you've established some presence on the ground, some credibility, relational ties, then over a longer period of time, you can add real value to that business from Kansas, for example. Okay, it's kind of like you're all familiar with Skype. You know, if you just try and have Skype conversations, you've never met the person face to face, the quality is diminished. But it really, really works well when you've had some encounter, and then you can fill in the gaps at really a deep quality. So that generally is the approach that we would recommend. Companies with a list of needs that they've got, we promote those, we explain those, and then if we can get at least some on-the-ground experience with follow-up, home-based input, that is the most potent approach that we found.
Yeah, just to build on that, in a group this size, there's probably 2 or 3 people who have some margin in your life, you're spiritually qualified, and you have a professional certification in something. You do something. You can make something happen on the job. And you say, how can I get involved? Those kinds of people we push in the direction of what Craig just said, not in terms of his investment company, but in terms of getting to know a business, and we call them consultants. So will you listen well, try to understand, and then try to coach them along the way. And as you do that, you bring in what we call subject matter experts. Let's say you're not an accountant, and they need that. Okay, then you and us try to find an accountant to help them. Meanwhile, you continue to coach and consult with them and listen to them. Listening is a big deal because you've been in business, and these folks are just starting off, many of them. And so we bring in the subject matter experts as we go. Your expertise, of course, is allowed to come to the forefront. So that's kind of how it works with us. So, for example, we just assigned a banker to a company in Central Asia. You know, he's been around the banking world all this time, and he wants to get involved. Okay, we try to understand and apply his banking experience to this business. You know, he doesn't have all the understanding of the production in that business, so we're bringing in an agriculturalist into the mix. And so we bring this in. It's all to help this business be credible, established, profitable, and a real true kingdom business. Gwen, could you
5 right off the bat that we're looking for are basic HR strategy all the way through specializing in certain just human resources development, tax and legal expertise, ideally specific to certain regions of the globe, marketing and specifically social media marketing, IT and web development, and then the last one is grant research and writing and specific opportunities within the medical field.
So those that she listed are needs that we have as an organization in this country to help us do a better job. I think maybe your question, in addition to that, included how to connect with businesses overseas. And Craig responded that he would get back to you. And what typically happens is somebody comes and says, well, I'm an engineer and I do this. How can I fit in? And then we respond back with some opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give an illustration. Company that we've invested in Indonesia, a tourism resort, and they had under-designed their bathroom facilities in these individual chalets. And to expand out, you know, was going to require breaking up concrete, potential implications for jeopardizing the rest of the structure and so on. So we linked them with a subject matter specialist in Australia whose background area is reinforced concrete steel constructions. And they electronically exchanged the drawings and from Australia to Indonesia without leaving the Indonesian or Australian context, were able to get that information exchanged. So those are really value-added opportunities that we've got. But they do tend to be on a case-by-case basis, right? So I think you just keep sticking with the story, right? And see what opportunities the Lord opens up. You won't necessarily on day one get 6 to choose from. But as we build community, maybe within 2 months, 3 will show up, or whatever, maybe just 1. But there are these opportunities to really add depth and a sense of fulfillment to your background.
Let me just continue this with this particular business here. Here's a fellow who had gone to Indonesia with YWAM training, and he was out planting churches. Now, his background was he's an architect. He's a professionally trained architect. He gave that up for Jesus, took the YWAM training, went to Indonesia, and bought a boat, and went around all the islands preaching the gospel. Great missionary endeavor. We love him. Rob is his name. He came to us and said, here's an island where there's a small boat building business for sale. The British guy who runs it wants to sell it and go back to England, and he wants to sell it to me. Now, what did this guy bring to the table? He brought a lot of things to the table. He works with people. He knows how to share the gospel. What else? He's a self-starter. What profession did he have? He's an architect. So those are ingredients. All those ingredients were speaking our language. What didn't he have? He had no business background, no training. Had always worked for other people or his work of evangelist. And he called me up and said, can you help me? All right? Now, and so I was foolish enough to say yes. No. This was a great fun thing. So what we had to do was look at various things like this. No one of us had all these skills. So we had to look at the financial due diligence. Was this a good deal or not? Now, there are smart people who can do that. They've been around the business world. They understand numbers. They understand bottom line. They can do financial projections. And we decided not to buy the business, but do an asset acquisition. Some of you know what that means. I didn't know what it means when this started. We acquired the assets, changed the name, and started over. Because we didn't want any legal difficulties down the road. Well, I wouldn't have thought of that, but people like you think of these things. And so we did the financial due diligence. We consulted on with legal authorities. So we hired a tax attorney in Indonesia that somebody recommended. We paid him to keep us out of trouble as much as possible. I said as much as possible. He had to capitalize it. Where was he going to get the money from? Now talk about corruption. When we went over there with our consultant, he was from Pennsylvania here actually. He's still working with us. He works a lot with us. He went over there, talked to this British guy who was selling it, and we talked about profit and loss and so on. He went to the back of his house to a shed. He took a crowbar and he pried up the boards of this shed. He brought out a paint can, and in the paint can was $150,000 in U.S. cash. And he said, these are my profits, and I'm trying to figure out how to get it out of here. Now, this guy was not a Christian, and that, of course, was unacceptable to us. And what he did with his money is one thing, but we had to go and figure out legally and financially, could we make money and could we pay taxes? Rob, the guy buying it, with our consultant, went to the tax authorities on the island and said, if I buy this business and I turn this much revenue in 1 year, what would my taxes be? This was his question. He looked at him, the tax guy looked at him with a really weird look and basically said, you're the first person in my entire career that ever asked me what my taxes would be. And then, the key question, why are you asking? Now, you may not understand BAM too much, but it doesn't get any better than that. Because he had long conversations about the gospel with that tax guy. And we ended up with a plan for paying taxes. So then I got off on that sidetrack, but capitalization issues, how are we going to raise the money? So we figured out how to raise the money. God's people gave the money. This is about the highest risk investment you'll find, these kinds of things. Craig can tell you far more stories than me. This is not a low risk situation. You are investing your money into something that can have phenomenal eternal results, or it can really go south. So venture capital is a big deal in this, and Craig will talk more about that. Expansion planning. After he was in this for a couple of years, he wanted to to take a loan to expand. It didn't work out. Did he talk to you about this? Yeah, it didn't work out, and so on. But anyway, we helped them do the due diligence. Is what would it look like to prepare for a business loan, which he'd never done before. Questions of margin. You know, pretty soon, what's happened oftentimes is I get a call from the wife and says, "You got to help me." I said, "What's up?" "Well, my husband's spending 80 hours in the week, and I never see him anymore. 80 hours a week in the business." Typical problem. He's lost the sense of margin, sense of balance. All those things become things that we can mentor him in, and then management planning. All those are the kinds of things we had several individuals helping him from America. 2 and maybe 3 actually went there. Several of them never did go, but helped him with these specialized things. So that's a typical way that we get involved with business startups overseas. So that little vignette perhaps elicit some questions or comments.
Do these consultants get paid, or it just depends on what you're asking them to do?
Good question. Do they get paid? Craig can speak for him. I'll speak for IBEC Ventures. We have only paid 2 consultants in our 8-year history. We right now have about 25 people out on projects, and they're all volunteers. Yeah, we are, our revenue comes from, well, beside donations, people do donate to us because they believe in this. But the business revenue comes from 3 different ways, and so stop me if this is not what you're really asking. We do retainers. In other words, that group that John represents, and I'm still part of, Crossworld, they pay IBEC Ventures $30,000 a year to service their businesses. Okay, we get the $30,000, and we put in about 240 hours a year on those businesses. That's a retainer. So we know for this year we're getting $30,000. That's one way. Another one is a fee for service, charged by the hour, and we discount heavily because we're missionaries and we're still trying to be real business people. And so there's that, and then there's contracts. I'll give you an example of a contract. We went to another agency, Pioneers, and they're really working hard to understand this whole area. We did a project for them for $4,000. They paid us, and we went on our way. So that's a project. So that's where we get our revenue. Was that the nature of your question? Yeah. Other comments or questions? Or Greg, do you want to speak to that? Maybe it's, do you have his IBEX stuff up? I don't want to lose the opportunity for him to explain IBEX. So if you could take this off and put that on so he can talk about how IBEX works. I just don't want to miss it. Is that okay? Yeah. So we're going to get now into the money part more heavily. That's Craig's expertise, as you learned from before.
Is there a gizmo? Is this what advances it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Well, John's getting that up. Any
other
questions
Yeah.
for either of us? Comments or questions? Yes.
Security issues. When you're in another country, a lot of times you're a target if you're American. How do you direct people in secure areas?
I'll give my comment, then Craig can. He talked about being ready to be a martyr for Jesus. So we do give training for that, to help people not be dumb and make dumb mistakes. But we're very strong on this. I tell people, if you get off the plane and the King of Morocco says, "Why are you here?" right now, you don't even get into the terminal, and he's there waiting. Because that's the question everybody asks. Why are you here? The king asks you, you have an answer that makes sense to him. He says, "Oh, good, welcome to our country." Or if the most lowly, illiterate street sweeper that you meet down the road says, "Why are you here?" your answer makes sense to her, and everything in between. Now, we have to train for that. But a typical answer would be, I'm part of a business that is producing this service or this product in this community. We're hiring people, and we are creating value for your Moroccan community. That's the answer. Now, they expect us all to be Christians anyway. We're white-faced, aren't we? I mean, that means Christian. So, and they all love to talk religion anyway. The thing that's the big red flags is the word mission, the word missionary, and the word Christian. And we train our people to not use any of those words. Now, those words have endeared themselves to us for generations. So that's tough. But we are followers of Jesus. And we try to live out what Jesus taught us. If you tell that to a Muslim imam, you have a conversation. You don't have rejection. But we have to go from there to sharing the gospel. And that could take months or years. Go ahead.
I think that's a great response. The only thing I would add to it would be that it's not only Americans that are the potential target. Nationals in the countries themselves can be very, very vulnerable. And so I think as we go into it, a common sense preparation, behavior on the ground, and there are all those skills. You know, you vary your routes, you pay attention to circumstances around you. I mean, those are just basic practices, but you can't live paranoid with what might happen. And it's healthy and helpful to understand we're not the only ones that are being singled out.
The worst thing that can happen, if every single business that I know, from Morocco clear across the Stan countries into Indonesia that we work with, every single one of them would do everything they can to disguise that I'm standing here now with an organization called Crossworld, which says on their website that they're here to make disciples of followers of Jesus. They hate Crossworld, but they'll talk to you about Jesus. That make sense? Now, that becomes a lifelong issue for these people. And it's very complex. You were going to ask something else.
The other thing is, how long is your training before you get to go?
I'll stop here, and then you can go from here to IBEX. But
We do front end. We don't actually do any formal front end training, formal, okay? But we build a relationship. We understand where the vulnerabilities might be, and we have input to equip. We do annual gatherings of all of our mentors and due diligence team and so on. And we gather as many of them from our global community as possible every year, once a week, typically in London. And in that community learning context, we just keep boosting our skills, equipping ourselves to do a better and better job as we go forward. So it's an ongoing training.
Could I just comment on that, and then I'll sit down, you can go here, Greg. We also meet at least once a year with our consultants, especially the new ones, and then we have several online courses, some of which we've used, others we're still developing, with you watch this, and then let's talk about it on the phone. That's what we're doing right now. But we just had one in Arkansas, we'll be having another one in North Carolina, that brings all the people together that are going to be doing this consulting, and we talk about integrity issues, we talk about safety and security, we talk about what does it mean to be a consultant, how do you be a good listener, those kinds of things.
One of the reasons we actually believe very strongly in strategic relationships between business practitioners and mission entities is they've got sometimes decades, if not centuries, of deeply embedded understanding, cross-cultural, managing health issues and all of this sort of stuff. So we take a very, very collaborative approach intentionally. We don't think it's just going to be done by one part of the Christian community. It's going to take us all. Let me just tell a little bit about the IBEX story, re-emphasizing the confidentiality issue. This is I think a 250-meter high dam in Eastern Europe, and behind this massive reservoir. And when you look closely, you can see the engineers did a very, very bad job of smoothing off the concrete face of this dam. But then wait a moment, take a closer look, and let me introduce you to the ibex. This incredible, incredible mountain goat that is able to navigate vertical wall faces. And what it's doing is eating moss and lichen off the wall and licking the salt and so on. This is the environment in which this amazing animal, the ibex, lives and thrives. And so this morning, the ibex is looking at you. and saying, do you have the right stuff? Are you interested in becoming a part of what is happening in regards to this great movement? Here are three important things about the ibex. It's this mountain goat. It's indigenous to the part of the world where we're investing, and so it suits our footprint. It's also a great reminder that ministry is not something soft and woolly and fluffy. The ibex is very, very tough, very agile, very hardy animal, and it's our style. But really encouraging is in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, you'll read that the ibex is one of the animals that the Israelites were given permission to eat. And we intentionally embrace the ibex as our company name because we're saying to business women and businessmen, business is a sacred calling. It will not make you impure. Barbecue it, curry it, do whatever you want with it, eat it in whatever is your style, but it is ordained by God as a sacred calling in its own right. So that's where we get our name from. Who are we and what do we do? We have deeply embedded in our DNA this prophetic calling from Micah chapter 6, verse 8. What does the Lord require of you, O man, O woman, but to love justice, to do kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? And what we're doing every day, I get up and I get to thank God that I'm copying Him as a God of justice. I'm copying Him as a God of kindness, and I am engaging in creative, redemptive activities, walking with Him. What is our mission? To extend the kingdom of God by enabling Christians in business to grow and lead profitable, sustainable, and effective companies in the Arab world and Asia. So you know how businesses struggle to capture what is their mission? What is it they are about? You can't do everything, but what is it that you are going to do and why? And so as a business, this is our product offering. We have essentially three elements in our product offering boutique. First of all, we provide growth capital, so mezzanine finance. Anyone who's got a background in finance, companies that have got 1 or 2 years of track record behind them, they've got proof of concept, and now they suddenly realize they've got opportunities to grow and there's no capital available to do that. So we typically provide 3 to 5 year loans, $25,000. We're now actually more and more going up above $250,000, $333,000 in loans to qualifying companies. We also provide intellectual capital through mentoring services, focusing particularly on the senior company personnel and particularly focusing on commercial issues in that business. This is on the assumption, not always true, that the strategic mission partner with which that BAM practitioner may be associated is providing the bulk of the spiritual input they need, or their local church is providing the bulk of that spiritual input. Where that is not happening, we also are stepping in to provide some of that mentoring as well. And then we provide assistance to companies in finding strategic human talent that they need related to this succession issue. Here's a little bit of our history. We began in 1998, so we're now well into our second decade. We've raised over $4 million from a global community of more than 200 investors. So we're not an American fund. We're not a Canadian or a Swiss fund. We've got investors from Indonesia. We've got Christian investors from Pakistan, from Brazil. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that within the global BAM story, our role is from all nations, to all nations, with all nations all the time. We have an unprecedented opportunity now moving into the BAM space to be part of an unprecedented global community. And that to me is a really, really exciting thing. So part of the selling feature, if you like, is that you as an American Christian or I as a Canadian Christian, I don't have to just work with my own tribe. I actually am richly blessed by the opportunity to co-labor with Singaporeans, Pakistanis, Brazilians, Germans, and how exciting is that? And guess what do I discover? The American perspective is not the only one. The Canadian perspective is not the only one. So this is a particularly exciting thing. Now, $4 million doesn't seem like a lot of money. And it's not if you're talking about a US fund. But here's a rule of thumb. Multiply this number by 50 to 100 times. So what would a $400 million small medium enterprise, small cap fund in the United States be able to accomplish? That, roughly speaking, is the bang for the buck equivalency that we're getting in countries where the gross domestic product, where the per capita earnings may be $600 a year, $1,200 a year. Middle income countries now, do you know what qualifies as an average per capita income for a middle income country globally? Any idea? Sorry? $1,000. That's actually a very, very good guess. Typically between $2,500 to maybe $5,000. All right, so imagine, I mean, that's what you earn in a week. All right? And so we need to understand this relative economic context. So we've been able to invest in over 38 companies, 17 countries in the Arab world and Asia, 18 different sectors led by BAM practitioners from over a dozen nations. So this is some of the track record that God has been graciously building into our experience. This is a pretty interesting picture for those of you who like graphs. It just shows the steady growth of the business over the last 10 years, both in terms of the capital raised and the capital deployed into these BAM companies. And we've now crossed that point where the capital invested is in excess of the capital raised. How does that happen? You're reinvesting multiple times. And so it's an exciting trajectory that the Lord, by His grace and through a lot of really, really hard, professionally competent work, has enabled us to happen. And we are always raising new capital, and we're always looking for new deals to invest in. This is another very exciting reflection on what has happened in IBEX over the last decade. You see that in the blue, the total number of companies as new companies are added into the portfolio year by year. And then you can see the number of active companies at any one time. So some companies go through 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, 5 cycles of investing, and then they migrate out and they are now standing on their own. They're getting capital from liquid capital markets, whereas before at a higher risk stage they couldn't, or they are internally financing their growth. So this is some of the way in which that fund management happens. So our enthusiasm is for authentic commercial enterprise, which is intentionally missional and transformational. That's what gets us really excited. What are some of our strategic priorities? We are focused on this so-called red zone of the Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist majority worlds. If you want to think about unreached peoples of the earth by population, 47% of the entire unreached world population is Muslim. 47%. Hindu, almost a third of the world's unreached are Hindu. 10% Buddhist. So if we are going to think strategically about what Christ wants us to do in regards to this unfinished task, this is part of the world that we need to be focused on. And so you can see how the companies in which we've invested have clustered across these areas of the world: North Africa, the Middle East, West Asia, Central Asia, South Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia. So this is where our footprint is, and you can begin to see this kind of flywheel momentum beginning to build. Another strategic priority is we are focused on business as mission, not in the subject matter expert space. SME here means small, medium enterprise. So which is the critical area for growing economies, for transformational change in these societies. Another strategic priority is our commitment to forging strategic relationships. We are not doing this on our own. And IBEC Ventures is one of the key strategic partners that we have, and it's a joy to be serving together with them. Essentially, this kind of strategic partnership looks something like this. You've got the BAM enterprise, the BAM practitioner, who, in their relationship with IBEX, maybe getting financial investment, mentoring, and human resourcing. With another mission partner, maybe getting member care, cross-cultural advice, and holistic local impact. And then the strategic relationship between the two of us on the bottom there. What we want to do is to serve the global BAM movement with scalable, replicable, just business. We're not driven by getting a visa to get in. That's not what we're interested in. Nor are we concerned primarily about making money in a successful business that we can give away to other business initiatives or other ministry initiatives. But focusing on being a servant leader, creatively solving problems, and focusing on profitable reproductive businesses to extend the kingdom of God. Here are the 5 things that we're looking for in any business in which we invest. Are they producing goods and services that add value and quality to people's lives? Secondly, are they creating jobs with dignity? Thirdly, are they establishing and built upon responsible financial foundations? Not being carried forward by donor funding, but being built on a foundation, a business foundation of equity, debt, risk, reward kinds of considerations. Are they operating ethically within the context of distorted worldviews? Welcome to the real world. Okay, if you won the coin toss, which end of the soccer field would you take? Well, it's all skewed and screwed. Bringing the knowledge of Jesus to people everywhere and engaging, I think one of them got missed, engaging with the national church as it's established. Now, you wonder some of the companies that we're involved in. Here's an overview of the sector of investments that we have made. So it looks pretty diverse in the BAM space. BAM is about a whole lot more than just saying, oh, I think I'll open up an internet cafe. There's nothing wrong with an internet cafe, but look at the possibilities that we have in front of us, and this is just scratching the surface. So we see IBEX as an on-ramp for Christians with an interest in putting some of their investment capital into a kingdom-focused opportunity. If you're interested in that, simply contact me. We're looking for people who are saying, I want to get involved with IBEX Ventures or through IBEX in mentoring, in coaching. If you're interested, contact us. And then we're also looking for people who would say, I've got a business idea, I want to go. Or I've got a business skill that I want to make available. Where can it be plugged in? So thank you for this opportunity just to introduce briefly what we do in IBEX. Larry?
Okay, thanks, Greg. Before we give the last couple of slides, any questions or comments from this? Yes.
You take leads, when you say you do a contract, is that like if someone would come to you and say in South America, I would like to do this project, you would help them do that? Is that like your contracting?
Yeah, we vet that out first. We tend to work in the same geographical space that Craig just mentioned, but you can answer for IBEX. But for IBEX Ventures, we would look at the type of business. Probably the biggest BAM guy in the world is a guy named Dwight Nordstrom. He makes this key point: the type of business you have in that community does make a difference, because we're there for the gospel, remember? And so those kinds of questions we ask as we go forward. But we do take businesses outside the 1040 window, but we would process it before we make a contract. So it'd be quite a bit of conversation. Yes.
Your capital, your $4 million, are you purely a lender, or do you take more of a venture capitalist, where you take an equity stake in the business? And long term, how do you make sure that principles in which you doing BAM, how does that make sure that business owner doesn't simply, as that business owner gets bigger, the business consumes them and can lose focus on the real mission out there? If you don't have an equity stake, how do you?
Yeah. That's a great question. First of all, from a fund mandate perspective, most of what we do is debt, but we do have the mandate that includes taking an equity position. Okay, so we can do both. In practice, the vast majority of what we have done has been lending, has been a debt instrument. Here's an exciting thing that we've discovered over the years that we've been involved, that the companies in which we invest, we actually don't invest in projects, we invest in people. And the people, in our experience, are people of their word. Their word is their bond. And that's an important reminder. The only thing at the end of the day that I've got left is my word. This is what it means to be a Christ follower. That when you say you'll do something, you'll do it. What that's meant in practice, Jeff, is that in contrast to the conventional wisdom and experience here in North America, for example, where if you don't have equity, you don't have influence, that's not true in BAM. Having an equity stake in a business, in our experience over the last 15 years, has virtually a tiny incremental addition to the moral, relational influence we have in that business through being a lender to that business. It's very, very fascinating. It's not done anything, in our experience, to strengthen the integrity of the business. We don't need to leverage our equity position to get greater influence or to get more listening. It's a fascinating alternative construct to what we see typifies the world's approach to this issue. Now, how do we do it in practical terms? Our due diligence process is extremely rigorous, both on the spiritual impact side and the commercial business side. Our mentoring is equally rigorous. It's not perfect, and we're constantly working at upgrading it and improving it. But it really pays close attention. What we have found is very, very rarely, if ever, has there been an overnight change. It's small steps that can be corrected as they appear. And I want to close my answer to your question by saying at the end of the day, there is no guarantee. There can be no guarantee because we're human beings. We can turn away from the Lord. There is no guarantee. We are business practitioners. Our business can fail. All I can say is that we reduce the chances of that outcome by engaging in businesses the way I've just described. And turning away from Jesus is not the only thing that can happen. We've had some companies say, I actually no longer want to do rigorous BAM. I want to revert back to an NGO kind of model. And they've said, we can get money on a double-spaced, font size 12, one-page grant proposal to a group with no questions asked. Why should we go through, the colonoscopy type experience of a due diligence process, with the accountability and everything? So this can sometimes be as troubling to us in a way as divergent for other reasons. But it is risky. There's no other way ultimately of answering it. We have seen, however, that an astonishing process of continuing to walk with the Lord and engage with the Lord, and a survival thing that is testimony to God's grace and goodness. Excellent question. Thank you.
Yeah, those kinds of questions could keep us here all afternoon. They are very important ones, and they don't have easy answers. But thanks, Craig, for that. I want to close with a couple slides here. What's going on here, right here in Lancaster County? And how can I do something after this meeting? And there's a networking group called Nouveau Business. And they have a Lancaster chapter. And what they do is it's by and for business people. Now, if you're a nurse, they won't throw you out, but you're welcome to come. But the people who run it are by business people. It's for networking, collaboration, community, and it helps to provide on-ramps to business as mission. In other words, whatever age you are, and Craig was right earlier, is that the expertise in this room is more in the consulting, guiding, mentoring type of sphere, rather than actually going to someplace. But there are young people in your church that should go, and you can help them go. And you can network with others to see how that could happen here. Specific opportunities you can do now. That question came up earlier. Focusing on the least reached, because these are about real businesses, real profit, and real disciples. They have monthly chapter meetings, visiting speakers, videos, prayer, mentoring, and they want to start, it says here they want to start a chapter. They already did. And it's April 25th, right, John? I think the first meeting is April 25th. So if you go on this website, you can get the place and date exactly. I think is it a breakfast meeting? Are you going to talk about that? Okay, so monthly chapter meetings in partnership with Agora Enterprises and IBEC Ventures and other BAM practitioners, visiting speakers and so on, and the chapter will be here in Lancaster monthly starting April 25. John will talk more about that. I'd like to conclude with questions that we often get is, how can I act like Jesus in my business here? What does that mean for me? And the very best book, which has a study guide, if you're looking for something for your men's group or your ladies' Bible study or whatever, The Integrated Life by Ken Elder, experience the powerful advantage of integrating your faith and work. There's a study guide here. It's a great book and study guide to talk about that, and they're going to be using it at one of these chapter meetings, several of them, to talk about that. Because if we do this in some faraway, high-risk countries, we want to be sure that we're modeling what we already are trusting God for in our lives here. Craig will be speaking tomorrow morning at both services, so hope most of you will be there, and you'll be challenged with that as well. Thank you for inviting us to be here. And John has a few concluding things to say. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I want to read a quote from, you've all heard of the Gallup poll, have you not?